All right, hi. Welcome to the Ed Solly Show with Vet Voice. I've got my guest with me today, Mark Lajoye. He is a combat veteran. Today we're going to discuss some of the things that he sees going on in the government and the way that the troops are being treated in this most recent burn pit bill, if you actually can even call it that anymore, once $500 billion gets added into it. So welcome on, Mark. Tell us a little about yourself and your career and how you got started in the military and when you retired.
Well, it's kind of interesting because I had first started out with a police background. When I first came in, I had an uncle who was a state trooper for the Michigan State Police, and he used to show me. I'd go visit him, and he'd show me everything about his cases. He'd show me case files. He used to ride me around in his state police car, and the lights. Back then, they had red lights and stuff, and so that was interesting to me. So that I got bit by the bug early about
Right.
law enforcement and ended up being, reserved in a county sheriff's office as a reserve officer. And a lot of people asked me, said, well, why didn't you continue on with that? Well, problem was I didn't, my mom was a sole parent at the time, didn't have any money. And I wanted to go to college after I got out of high school. And I graduated, in 1979 from a place called Escanaba, Michigan, way up north in the UP. And so I decided to go into the Army because they were offering me a bonus and some college money. So I did. Went in the Army December 27th, 1979. I ended up in basic training at Fort Knox, Kentucky, godforsaken place, about as cold as you can get. It's where
Colder
I learned
than
how to drink
Michigan.
coffee. Yeah, well, no, that was well, being from Michigan, everybody says it's a dry cold, a wet cold, but it
Right.
was a different cold in Fort Knox. And then when you're out there in the middle of nowhere, and you're going through training, I mean, that's where like I said, I learned how to drink coffee. The best thing, they brought us soup and coffee, which was hot, and we were freezing our butt off. And but then I started to look back at my military career, and I said, is this really what I want to do? Is this something that so, I questioned myself, but I got through that. And then they sent me to a little bit warmer place, which was called Fort Benning, Georgia.
Yeah.
So I ended up in Fort Benning, Georgia for infantry training there. Loved it until I got to the basic training place. And I was a pretty smart guy when I was at Fort Knox, Kentucky, because the drill sergeants asked for a volunteer driver. And I said, you know what? I've been driving trucks since I was 10 years old. My dad taught me how to drive Army trucks. We used to have one. And I drove it around. It had a big old steering wheel. I was 10 years old and my dad put blocks on the wheels so I put the brake foot, in the clutch and all that stuff, and the gas. So I already knew how to drive a lot of Army trucks. Well, it was pretty natural for me to volunteer my services. So I did. And I became a company driver. So I would ride behind all the foot marches, which was smart.
Yeah.
You have to do the 10, 15-mile foot marches. Well, I wish I had, because when I got to Fort Benning, Georgia, it's a whole different ball game. I told a drill sergeant there, I said, hey, look, I've got a license, military license. I could drive truck. Yeah, I know. Get in the line. And that was it. So the first road march we didn't have what they call cattle cars. They put you in with a cattle car and they drive you to the range. We didn't have that. We walked to every range that we had to go on. And right away, I knew the blisters started coming in. And we're doing these 8, 10-mile road marches, 12-mile road marches. And I just said, man, I killed myself. That was stupid for what I'd done. I should have got my feet hardened and all. And so it was tough through infantry training, and then got through that. And then I graduated that day. I got transferred over to airborne school, which is on Fort Benning, Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
And went through airborne training, became a 5-jump chump, what we call them. Made my 5 jumps out of a perfectly good airplane.
Yeah.
And ended up, my first duty station was in Fort Riley, Kansas, another godforsaken place that's cold in the winter, very cold. Windswept land over there. Ended up there. Then I spent about 18 months and ended up in Panama. I was 3 years in Panama. Met my wife at Fort Riley, and then we were married. And then I got over to Panama, did my thing there, and then various other places of active duty. And 1992, I got out of 92 during the Clinton era, and he was reducing numbers of troops, good old Clinton. Mm-hmm. And then at that point, I got into the Army National Guard, the Alabama Army National Guard. And long story short, after a couple of years in a unit that I didn't like, I ended up, tacking to the Command Sergeant Major, and ended up in the 20th Special Forces Group. So in the 20th Special Forces Group, was training to, do the training and go off to Fort Bragg and those things, to the Fort Bragg School of Boys over there. And then I ended up back down at the battalion at different levels like that, different deployments we went on. And then I ended up, leaving there for a short time on a promotion, which made me an E8, which was a master sergeant, and stayed in an EOD unit, which I deployed with in 2010 and 11. I was in Baghdad. But prior to that, I ended up with 20th Group to in January, shortly after January, I got activated to go into Afghanistan. And that was an experience. That was a real experience. Going into Afghanistan, we were had infilled, what we call infiltration, into Kandahar. So we infilled into Kandahar, Afghanistan, spent a few days there, and then deployed forward toward the Hindu Kush Mountains, which is the foothills of the Himalayas of Afghanistan, which, as you can imagine, 8, 10, 12,000 foot mountains, surrounding us up there. And we end up replacing 5th Special Forces Group. And I remained there from all the way up till September, shortly after September 11th. We did our first ceremony of the September 11th attack right there in country. And that was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
The whole time we were over in Afghanistan, that mission, as you can well know, we were chasing, Taliban up there, basically looking for bin Laden is what we were looking for.
Right.
And lost a good friend of mine there, made a good friend of another guy from another unit, ended up losing him in an ambush. We got attacked in a village close to the Pakistan border. Ended up losing him, and I started writing a book about the incident, more as a therapeutic thing for me.
Yeah.
It affected me somewhat, and then I just stopped writing the book. I still got it. I get calls occasionally from publishing companies. They want to publish the book, but
it's a hard story to tell.
It is a hard story to tell because that night, the ambush, the soldier that died, I loaded his body on the aircraft that when we were getting ready to ship him back to Kandahar. And kind of a long story short, I won't go through the details, that part of it, but early in the morning at about 7 or 8 o'clock, it was a pretty harrowing thing. The company commander, during the ambush that time we came back in, it was as nervous and as nerve-wracking as it could be. And the company commander, I was sitting in a chair outside after Gene had died. And he basically said, man, I sure wish I had a drink of bourbon and a cigar. And I says, I can help you there.
Yeah.
So prior to us going over, we stopped at Gander, Newfoundland. And I went into a duty-free shop, got some Cuban cigars, got a box of them, and brought me a bottle of liquor in and kept it with me for medicinal purposes, obviously. And that night I told him, I said, I can help you out. And we sat over there and had a cigar with him and a drink. And he says, my God, he says, this is heaven right here. And that next morning when I woke up, like I mentioned earlier, it was about 7 or 8ish. The sun was just starting to come up over the mountains. And the stretcher that I put my partner in, when you load it, I had to, when we lifted his remains up, I had to step in the center of that to get him in the aircraft. Well, when I looked over that morning, my boot print was still in his blood. that was on the stretcher. Now you're talking about, trying to you relive an experience, the whole thing that happened again, So when I started writing the book, that was going to be my cover of the book, was that blood print, that footprint in his blood that was on the center of that stretcher.
Yeah.
And
Wow,
so,
that'd be powerful.
yeah, extremely powerful. I still have the boots I wore that night, still have them. So it was a pretty harrowing experience. And shortly after I got back, the Special Forces commands have set up these lines where if you had children from fallen soldiers, they support them, with college funds and monies and things of that nature. And I didn't realize it, but this particular soldier had another extended family. And I didn't know that he had an older daughter involved. And so I got a call from them. So now this is a couple of years later, and now I'm reliving this whole experience over again. And at the same time was writing the book, and I just decided to put it down and didn't do it anymore. And that was it. That was the end of that. And I still, like I said, I still have the book. I still have the manuscript from it. Has never been gone through yet. But every so often, every 6 months or so, I got a publishing company out of New York calls me and said, "Hey, are you ready to publish that book yet?" I said, "I'm not done with it."
Yeah.
So that's kind of the story, and I ended up coming back. I came back, and of course I was a police officer when I came back from Afghanistan. So I went right back into police work shortly thereafter that, and remained in that job all the way up to 2005. And then I resigned from that position at the police department and went into government contracting as a government contract, and went to various locations all over the world, obviously training. I was a program manager in a couple other projects, which is, if you know anything about government contracting, that's kind of the next step up into your career, a very important one. Usually a program manager pays six figures, which is pretty good.
Yeah.
I know the first time I came into government contracting from police work, they never make a lot of money in police work, and end up being, I got about a $30,000 a year pay raise instantly going into government contracting. And so I had a good run. I had about 10 years of it. And then I ran for sheriff here. I started running in 2008. I ran in 2012, 2016, 2020. And we'll see. I might run in 2024 too. So we'll see what happens. But that's it in a nutshell. 2.5 years ago, I finally retired. I went back to Special Forces Group and became the interim command sergeant major of the Group Support Battalion. And then also at the same time, I was the first sergeant of Alpha Company of the Group Support Battalion, which is a very important position for that group, because it has all of the logistical support guys in it, the people that pack parachutes that we jump from. I have to say, one of the finest parachute packing facilities that I've ever come across. Very professional guys, and it was an honor to have them in my group. So I did that, and then 2.5 years ago, finally made the final move. I tried to extend past my 40-year career, and of course the state command sergeant major said, "Nope, time for you to go home." And they put the boot to my rear and kicked me out, and here I am 2.5 years later, and I'm back in law enforcement. So I do law enforcement duties, which I enjoy, obviously. But that's kind of my story in a nutshell.
Yeah. And we were talking offline about this burn pit bill that just passed. And the question I've been asking most veterans, and I've got several friends close to me that are veterans and 20, 30 years in, is, okay, so obviously the optimum is we don't add $500 billion and we just pass a bill that does what it says it's going to do. Not really reality in today's world. So the question is, a burn pit bill that addresses a real issue, but tax on $500 billion, is that a bill worth passing?
This was a situation where they basically held, any conservative movement held them hostage on this thing. And, shame on them for doing what they did. That should have been a separate bill in itself, and probably even more money put into that just as a separate bill in itself. They knew when they passed that bill that conservatives or even conservative candidates running for Congress and Senate, they couldn't attack that bill. They couldn't attack the contents of it. They tacked it in there, and shame on them for doing that. Because number one, it should never be an add-on. It should have been primary. And this has happened in the past for other things that we've had, vet illnesses and things like that have been tacked on the end of another bill. And it really holds. It's unfortunate. I'm glad that portion of it's in there to help vets, but the way they did it was totally wrong. Totally
Right.
wrong. It should have been, like I said, a separate bill. And it just, to me, what it does is it shows the importance where they thought the importance was at. We should have been primary to that.
Right.
I don't care about solar power. I don't care about electric cars. It's all a fad as far as I'm concerned. But tacking it on, that was totally irrelevant to what the bill should have represented to begin with.
Well, and it's what frustrates me is, this is an issue we knew about, and this is something that we should have been able to address 4 years ago, 5
Right.
years ago. We had a Republican Congress, Senate, and President, and we missed our chance to pass the bill the right way.
Right.
To take care, and now things have only gotten worse. These sicknesses haven't gotten better in the last 5 years. We knew about them 5 years ago. And, now we've got, and it's not now, it's been going on, got a mental health crisis going on with veterans. And one of the biggest concerns I see is, if you don't give a full 20 years, your benefits don't represent your true repercussions of service.
Exactly.
You do 4 years and you're in a combat zone for 4 tours, 3 tours, 2 tours, anything, you're going to carry that.
Yeah.
Your story about your book kind of highlights that. That's going to stick with you, and there's help that's needed there. And I think we're still not addressing that issue even remotely close enough.
Yeah, no, it's not. And that, like I said earlier, it should be the sole focus, not tacked on something else. And again, that just tells me, the liberal side of the voice is telling us that, yeah, you're important, but you're at the bottom of that list.
Right.
I mean, we as veterans, we gave our life, we gave our commitment to this country and doing the things that we did. And this is the way they want to treat us. That's what really irks me more than anything, is we're at the bottom of the list. We should be at the top of the list. And there's some folks out there that, they said, well, you guys get everything. Why should you get everything? I was like, well, you could have volunteered your services and but you didn't.
Right.
Whatever reason you didn't, whether it was a health reason or it was just a personal reason or a political reason why you didn't want to do it, I get it. I understand that part of it. But some of us, we served this country, without reward, without benefit. We thought that when we got in there, that the Army would take care of us. And I'm going to tell you, there's issues, you find this out when you retire. You find out exactly how much money do you owe back the government. The government's trying to collect $75,000 out of my retirement check for something that a bill got passed 2 years after I got out, and I got the money. And now
Right.
well, you got that bonus. Now you got to pay it back to us because you went back in the service again. And I was like, I was never told that when I was contracted, when I got out, that I would have to pay that money back when I got in the reserves. So they're recouping that money out of my check every month. This just goes to show you. And it was like, oh, well, you know what? And you're right. The Republicans had control of both the House and the Senate. And again, it's a never-ending revolving door. It doesn't matter who's in power at the time. But the bottom line is, they don't see the importance of that. They'll talk a good talk, but they don't walk a good walk. And the bottom line is, if we get back the majority that gets back in there, if the conservatives don't take this mantle and run with it and do good things, they're going to be in term one in a short term, one term in office, and then it's going to flip back over again.
Right.
So, this is the bad thing, is that when they get in there and they get the power, they need to do something with the power, good things,
Right.
not these things, bad things that they're doing, passing these crazy bills that we know that us in the middle class are going to end up paying for.
Well, and that's why we're seeing the shift, I think, in the political leaning of the military. It used to be, 20 years ago, military was as strong of a Republican vote as any voting base that existed.
Exactly.
And now it's 50-50 at best.
Yes.
If you're lucky, it's a 50-50. It's starting to lean the other way. And it's almost the obvious staring us in the face. Republicans say we care about the military, but then we get control and we do nothing with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what really irks me, is that, you get control of that and you don't want to do anything with it. My God, you're holding the mantle here. You have the opportunity to do good things that the other side is not doing, and you just let it piss away. That's the worst part of the whole thing that really irritates me, is, and I hope some of these candidates that we've got coming on board, there's some good, energetic young guys in there, some of them with military backgrounds that are coming in there. Most of them, I would say most of the ones we see running right now have a military background, which is important.
Mm-hmm.
We got to get rid of some of them old gray-haired guys like myself that are sitting up there for 30 years in those spots, not doing anything, and get somebody who wants to do something, actually do something for the vets, do something for our society, do something for the people out here, instead of taking advantage of it. And unfortunately, a lot of times what happens with some of these candidates, they get in there, and you get either on the Democratic side or the Republican side, they get a hold of them and say, look, I know what you ran on, but this is what you're going to do. You just basically shut up, sit down, and you vote.
Get in line.
Us. Yeah, vote in line and don't do anything. Don't raise any waves, and you'll make millions of dollars while you're there.
Right.
That's wrong. I've never,
And something I'm concerned about, we were talking about this, that a friend of mine, he's 28 years in, so he remembers pre-war military, 20 years of war, and now we're at peace again. And the military is a different beast. It's a whole different world when you're not at war. The things they do on a daily basis change dramatically. And we've got tons and tons of soldiers and officers who don't know how to handle that, don't know what to do. It's a different world, and you're supposed to segue into recovery from a war. And I don't know that we even know how to, because a 20-year war, I mean, that, everybody retires. Everybody that was pre-war retires out.
Yeah.
You're down to, I can't imagine the percentage that's been there pre-2002 when we were in war, and really you can call it 2001 when the military was already prepping for the imminent, declaration. So what do we do? Step down. What do the people in Congress do? What do we do to adjust our military, keep this social justice nonsense out of there? We still need to stay war ready. The next war is coming, but we don't even know how to do that.
No, we don't. And that's the problem. And I told you I got out 2.5 years ago, even though I was over 40 years of service, probably closer to 41 years. When I tried to put an extension into stay, this just kind of shows you how the policies are starting to creep in. These new policies are starting to creep into the military. But I tried to apply to stay because on the bottom end of everybody that was under me, I was fixing to lose those people. They were going to go to other assignments. They were going to be promoted to other positions. And I said, I basically wrote a letter to the state command sergeant major of that. And I said, look, I want a 2-year extension. And, that would have put me right at about, legally would put me a little over 42 years of service I would have had at the time. Because I felt enough that I wanted to keep the continuity of the company, the flow of everything going, helping new officers and new sergeants and that to come and take those positions, because I really did care about where my company was going when I left, where my battalion was going as an acting command sergeant major. I wanted to make sure that the foundation was still there. And this is what happened during the Clinton era. See, this has happened before, because when Clinton came in, he came in with the reduction to reduce troops from like 1 million down to 500,000. And here's what they did. They offered, like I said earlier, they offered these bonuses to get out. Well, they set a criteria in there, and the people who actually took the money, ran with it, were the good guys that they didn't want out.
Right.
And the bad guys, the bad soldiers who were there, they kept them there. And so we never got rid of them at that point. And some of those are the same folks that were going in to now what we go the 20, you're talking about the 20-year war, Afghanistan and Iraq shortly thereafter. All of those people were still in there. And then eventually we had the new folks coming in on board. And, you know, they had good reasons why some of the new folks were coming in. They were very patriotic. I mean, if you talk to a lot of them, they came in, and because 9/11 happened, they came in. You'll see, you know, tunnels to towers. There's one guy, and just about every one of those, I've heard it from them saying, you know, I was in the service prior to that, and I got out, and I came back in because I really wanted to get to Afghanistan or Iraq, because they were so patriotic about what happened during 9/11.
Right.
You know, and I knew the day I watched the airplanes, you know, run into the building, I was drinking a cup of coffee in my office at the police department, and I said, I'm going to get a call shortly. And I did. I got a call that day. Said, get your butt ready. You know, we're going.
Yeah.
And being a special operations unit, I knew that, you know, we were going to be the tip of the spear, so to speak.
Right.
But the bottom line is, we don't know how to recover from that. That's my experience. Is I used to teach NCOs at service academies, both on the NCO side, the non-commissioned officer side, and the officer side. I taught officer, you know, commission courses that I taught, and you'd be surprised the inexperience that's in there. So guys like me, us old farts with the gray hair, you need those guys.
More valuable than ever.
Yeah, I mean, you need that experience, and we don't have it now, and we don't know how to recover from that. And I hate to say it, but I'm wondering, I'm really questioning our readiness. I don't think we have the readiness tools. You know, we're going to all of these, I hate to say, these liberal policies that we're swaying to. You know, your military cannot be a liberal military. It cannot. It can be neutral, because you can have both, you know, liberals and conservatives serving and independents serving along each other. We've done it well. We have cohesion amongst us. We're all brothers. We bleed the same. We're red. We bleed red, and there's no color in blood. And the bottom line is, we're losing that. But, you know, your banner says the vet voice. We're losing it, you know, inside the ranks. And we're never going to be able to recover from that unless this fall, if the conservatives get this side of the house and they get in there and start doing things, you know, strengthening our military. You know, a peaceful country, the only reason it exists is because of a strong military and the people that are in it. And if you have a weakened military, and we already know that Russia and China is on the horizon right now, and you see what's pushing, they're pushing, you know, one side of our you know, our policies to see how far we'll actually go. Will we actually go in? Ukraine is another sneaky. I think it's going to be another Afghanistan, to be honest with you. I think we're going to end up being in there, much like we supported Afghanistan through the CIA many years back to overthrow Russia that was in the country. It looks eerily similar, because we supplied weapons, we supplied troops and support, we supplied special advisors, all those things. What are we doing over there? We're doing exactly the same thing. So Ukraine's another Afghanistan on the horizon.
Yeah. Well, and the people that suffer are the front lines.
Yes.
You know, you need to know when bullets start flying, the person next to you is there because they want to be there and they earned the right to be there, not because somebody in Congress wrote a bill because there was some group screaming and their delegates that wanted some representation in the special forces. You want representation in the special forces? Pass the special forces test.
Exactly.
Don't lower the test.
Right.
It's there for a reason. It's not there to feel cool. It's there to survive.
It's there to survive. And number one, you know, they operate as a cohesive team. You know, that those teams operate as a cohesive team. They train together. they bleed together, they have family cookouts together. What better thing can happen to a person is having that camaraderie ship, that brotherhood on both sides of the thing. Don't lower the standards. But see, that's what they've done. They've lowered the standards both for Ranger School. They've lowered the standards both for the special operations side of it. And it's all because we want representation in there. There's a reason why your military can't have its hand tied. You cannot have the heavy politics involved on that side of it. You got to let them do what they got to do. Now, within reason, but you got to have them. Nobody tied our hands in Afghanistan. We did initially what we had to do when we went in, and we took care of business.
Yeah.
And you have to have that. You have to have segments of the military that have no questions. And I'm talking about abusive structure or any of that kind of stuff. I'm talking about, no kidding, you got to go in and take care of business, and you got to do what you got to do. But again, we're tying the hands of our military, the supervisors, the policies that are being taught in our officer candidate schools at the West Point level. I've seen some of that information. It's very damning and very damaging. You've got to have leaders in there. You've got to have independent thinkers and leaders. We run what's called a decentralized system of promotion and command, meaning myself, being at the top, if I get killed off or injured seriously, the next senior man in that rank comes up and takes the structure, and so on and so forth, consecutive. Right. We're not a Russian-backed, bunch of conscripts or policies, because if you look at I trained troops both in Hungary and Afghanistan, and the Hungarian troops that I trained over there about 6 years ago, they have what's called a centralized promotion system. It's the old Russian concept. And you see what's going on right now in Ukraine. The Russians are getting their butt handed to them, because if you cut the head of the snake off, the snake just keeps twirling around in a circle.
Right.
They don't have a decentralized command system. They're still operating off the old context of the Warsaw Pact, rules and everything. And we're the same way. We could end up, it looks like that's where we're kind of ending up at.
Right.
We don't have independent thinkers anymore. We don't have folks in there. Everybody's afraid to do their job. You cannot be afraid to do your job in fear of being, sent off to prison or chastised or, thrown out of the service. And now, right, you look at recruiting is so bad right now. They're going to change the standards. Watch and see. They're going to lower the standards to get soldiers in just to fill ranks. You got to be able to have independent thinkers. You got to have thinkers that can get out there and do things. Now we're kind of going the other direction, and God forbid. I really feel for the military. I mean, they're still my brothers and sisters in arms, but I really feel that we're a weakened military more than anything now.
Yep, and I hope we don't learn a lesson the hard way.
Exactly.
Well, thank you, Mark. Mark is signed on to be a content creator with the Vet Voice, so you'll hear much more from him. He'll be your channel. What's your channel going to be called?
We're still swishing around some of the ideas and stuff. I guess he wanted to, we're looking at the law voice or law enforcement voice, out there, and we'll talk about vet law enforcement issues. As you know, it kind of goes hand in hand. We've got a lot of veterans that, come out of the police ranks, and go in, to police work or vice versa. So we got a lot of those, and I think it's important that we get the message out there. Let us know there's some great soldiers out there. There's some great police officers out there that do the job. We can't thank our soldiers and our law enforcement enough for the daily grind that they go through. If you realize what's behind the scenes and realize what's involved in it, you tell yourself, I wouldn't want to do that job. But there's lots of us out there that do that job, and we're proud to serve our community, proud to serve our country.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Mark. Look forward to more stuff coming in the future.
I appreciate it, Ed. Thank you for having me on today.
Thank you.
Good night.